My name's Jonathan Levien.
I'm Nipa Doshi.
And we are Doshi Levien. We're here in our studio in Columbia Road in London. We've worked on a couple of projects already with Quadrat. The Pilates installation, which has debuted at the London Quadrat showroom. We were interested to show the fabrics in an architectural way and to show them as these monolithic pillars of fabric. I think Quadrat were depending on us to bring something fresh, something new to the conversation of fabrics. We had our own way of doing this, and we're coming from not a background of textile design so much, so we're bringing some of our processes from furniture design and product design through to the fabric design.
In the beginning, it was clear that we weren't doing an upholstery fabric, because that would have been something that one would expect us to do, because we use a lot of the Quadrat fabrics in our upholstery.
We were looking at the collection in terms of not so much a furnishing fabric, but as an interior element that architects could use for their projects. And that changes the way that we perceive the material, because then we're creating space with this material, with color and texture.
The first presentation to Quadrat was in fact about 30 plaster castings to create a soft material. For us, it was interesting to start with the hard material to come up with a textile fabric. I think the idea really was to show the sensuality of the curtains, to not just show them in a flat way, but to create this sense of lightness in a building. I find it impossible to draw without color, and color is very much part of the idea for a collection. I'm very inspired by sun-faded colors or colors that feel like intrinsic color of a material. And yet we also have some really bright accents. So I think it's a real mix, but it's not a scientific, rational way of looking at color. It's working very much with the feeling.
I noticed the way that you were painting surfaces with the color and then punching holes in the sheets and then laying another color behind. And it was very much a kind of a sculptural, sort of dynamic process where you were bringing colors together, and you could see the palette kind of emerging as the time went on.
I think it's as much about inspiring architects to use color, because it's, I think, one thing, the textiles are the last thing that people think of, whereas what we wanted was that the textile to be in the initial palette for the building.
To understand the special features of the Bay collection, I think we have to look at how the concept was arrived at. First, we started by describing the outline of the chair through the use of very sensual curves that kind of describe the space. Secondly, we created the skeleton, if you like, or the structure. And this is what gives a very distinctive pocket-like nature to the chair. Onto which we have the weave, which is describing the surface. Once the skeleton has been surfaced, then you begin to perceive this volume, or this boulder, or this kind of monolithic sculpture in space. So these, I think, are the three main characteristics of the chair. Generally speaking, I think that what we're seeing is a culmination of craftsmanship and industrial production. Craftsmanship applied where the creation of the idea is concerned, and industrial production is the part that B&B knows so well. For me, it's always the combination of materials which I find interesting, and mixing the properties of the materials, bringing them together. I use cardboard a lot in the studio. I turn this very sort of characterless sheet of two-dimensional cardboard into a plastic material by the time I finished with it, and cut it and dart it and made sculptural forms from it. So for me, it's extremely malleable. It gives me a lot of creative possibilities. It's a very humble material. It's not maybe what you were expecting, but for me, cardboard is allowing me a lot of creative freedom to express my ideas.
Together, actually. It's always together, but sometimes the starting point can be a material. Sometimes it can be a manufacturing technology. Sometimes it could be the way people live, or sometimes it could be an opera that you've seen. So I think it can be so many.
There was a project we did for Moroso called Impossible Wood, the plastic chair that we did. That project started as a material, this material liquid wood, and it had a very strong characteristic. It sort of smelt and felt like leather. It had a very natural property, and it was actually a plastic made from wood pulp, and it was 100% biodegradable, so we thought very interesting to use it. So we developed the chair very much inspired by the material. As it happened, it wasn't strong enough to make the chair from, but it was an example of how a material could inspire us to go in a certain direction with a design.
I think our relationship with Ketal, I would say, is truly collaborative. So it's not like we work on an idea and then we present the idea. It's not so formal. I think we have a lot of discussions with Alex and Antonio, and we really get to the solution together. When we first met, it was really interesting that there were two projects. One was to create an icon.
Create a really enveloping, large presence of a chair, rather like the Emmanuel chair.
And the other one was textiles and color. And it was interesting because in some ways I think it was also a combination of projects that worked perfectly for us in the way that we work, because I'm more graphic and about color and I draw a lot, whereas Jonathan's process of drawing is to draw with materials. Of course, I grew up in India, which has really had a very strong influence on the way I look at the world. So I think in India, of course, modernity and tradition really coexist with everything else in between. And I think I try to bring that plurality into my work.
I left school at 16 and went to study cabinet making. I was very sure quite early on that I wanted to be a maker. And after 2 years of making things in wood, I decided to go more into design. And I'm now using making as a part of my process. As a way of drawing and sketching and sculpting, I still use that. But it's just the difference is I'm not making the final piece.
So in the case of terrain, for example, of course, it's an outdoor collection of fabrics. We really wanted to do colors that are influenced by nature. So I wanted to have dusty, natural colors for terrain. And at the same time, they're not boring neutrals. We have a very wide range of colors. I think the textiles we created also had a feeling of indoor fabrics. So they're nice to touch. They don't have a plastic feeling. But I think for us, it's really important that we keep the integrity of the idea through to the final piece.
I think Nipper and I both recognize that in any project, there's always one best idea. And as long as we find that, it doesn't really matter who came up with it.
But also I think that I'm the kind of person for me there are 5 best ideas. I try to bring many ideas into a project because I like the project to be really layered. And I think Jonathan is very good at editing and saying, no, I think that by doing this, we've done the idea. It doesn't need any more.
I think refined. And I think what's really interesting here is that Ketal are taking outdoor environments into a more elegant sphere.
For us, the starting point for the chair was really to create the most luxuriant and embracing chair that we could. A chair that you could sit on a veranda and peer out at the Himalayas and snow-capped mountains and wrap yourself in a warm blanket and really feel a connection with the outdoors. For us, the chair is a way of defining your position in a space, and for us, a place to hide in. It's a place for us to feel connected with our environment. So we decided to make the chair as a composition of forms. We started from the back of the piece. We wanted a chair that feels very rooted to the ground, has a strong relationship to the ground, and yet defies gravity at the same time. So that would explain the conical nature of the chair. In terms of materials, we've gone for the absolute best. For us, the leather is a B&B leather. It's called koto. It's not coated, so it's super smooth. And we've gone for a shearling headrest, which is very, very soft indeed.
We've admired B&B for a very long time, and of course in terms of research and design, they're one of the most important Italian companies because they invest a lot in technology and to create really complex products that in the end look very beautiful and simple. You know, when you see it from the back, for example, you don't really understand how the chair comes together. You know, and I think that's really the strength of B&B, to make something that's very technologically innovative, but you don't see the technology. You really feel the piece. And I think that's what's been the biggest joy of working with them. So even if you see the materiality of the piece, you know, with the shearling, with the leather, if you see the details of the leather, again, is like a finely crafted. So I think with this chair, what we really want to create the highest piece that you could have in your home, and something that is beyond fashion.
So my name is James McLaughlin. I'm the editor of Icon magazine, I'm here at the Moroso showroom with Doshi Levien, who are celebrating 10 years of their relationship with the brand. So maybe you could tell me, guys, about the first project you collaborated with Moroso on.
The first project that we did with Moroso was the Charpoy collection in 2007. And it was following a trip by Patrizia Moroso to our studio, and this was in February 2007. And she said, right, we're doing this project for Milan. That meant, of course, I had to go off to India and work with the master crafts people to make 4 different designs of the Charpoy collection, which had this game embroidered in the middle of it, referencing the Indian epic Mahabharata, where there's a war because 2 families play this game against each other. And I think it was really quite incredible, the response these pieces got in Italy at Salone, because of course it was combining Indian hand craftsmanship with Italy's industrial craftsmanship, because the bases were made in Italy. And I think to see that level of craftsmanship in the context of Salone was very new. And that really started our relationship with Moroso. And of course, since then we've worked on the beautiful backside sofa, the paper planes chair, and Armada Modernista sofa, which we launched this year. And I think our projects with Moroso reflect the plurality of Moroso as well. Moroso doesn't have a fixed, defined style, so to speak. I think we constantly feel challenged working with Moroso because of that.
I think those projects also reflect the differences between Nipper and I in terms of our design approaches. There's always this kind of need to reconcile our individual approaches to design, because really we have quite individual ways of working. My way of working is really, I'm engaged with making, and I've always been a maker. Since I was 16 I did cabinet making, going on to study design. But making is still very much an important part of my process. So if you look at pieces like paper planes, impossible wood, I'm really exploring how materials have their own language, and through kind of mastering and understanding the properties of those materials, whether it's wood or whether it's metal or card even, they can sort of give us something back, And then for us it's a question of recording that, capturing that kind of natural gesture of materials, putting that into design. And I think for me that's something that contributes to the longevity of a design, if it feels natural and comfortable with itself, but yet it can still be quite radical.
You mentioned earlier, Jonathan, that some of the earlier pieces were a kind of explosion of ideas, and there were lots of kind of ideas going on in these pieces. I wondered if now looking at all the work, sort of these key pieces in one place, you can sort of understand yourselves a bit more about how your own design languages evolve.
Well, I think in the first pieces, you have to think that when we started out as a studio, we had one client, which was Moroso. Essentially, we had some other things happening. Right. But so all of that creativity that we wanted to invest in our work was going, into these single projects that we were doing. And so if you look at my beautiful backside, for example, there's a huge amount of kind of exploration in terms of bringing materials together. You have wood leg meets a brass turned leg meets textile, which is designed by Giulio Rodolfo for Quadrat, but then printed on by us with gold, and molded buttons on the back and double piping. There was so much going on, and yet it works. It's a symphony of details and materials, and fantastic. Now I would say that we're more sparing with our ideas. I would say that we recognise the need to kind of maybe have 1 or 2 sort of big ideas within a project, and then make those ideas go a bit further.
And the latest piece, the Modernista piece, is kind of, I suppose, someone looking at your portfolio would say this is uncharacteristically restrained.
Yes, that's not.
I think it also reflects the kind of architecture we are interested in, and I think that modern architecture, especially the architecture of Corbusier, Louis Kahn, was very much a part of my upbringing as well, growing up in India. And the education I had was very Bauhaus and very form follows function. And I think that there is that, I would say that there is 2 sides also to our personality and the things we like, and one doesn't exclude the other. And I think that if you look at Modernista, it's a very architectural piece. It has very little form when you first look at it. But I think Modernista sofa is very much about, I would say, tropical modernism, where you had these incredible houses like the Casa Modernista in Sao Paulo, for example, the Villa Sarbai, in Ahmedabad in India, where you had these pieces which were incredibly restrained, but were also beautifully detailed. So I think we really tried to bring that sense of sartorial detail into the modernista sofa. So if you look at it closely, you can see the way the fabric is seamed, very subtle proportions. If you see the details of the legs, I think that I see the modernista sofa that, although it's very architectural, I think the more you look at it, the more details you will discover.
Well, thanks very much to Doshi Levien. It's been a really exhausting 3 days at Colombo, and this is Icon and Doshi Levien signing off.
Before we start our presentation, I just wanted to say why it's very special for me personally to be here. One of the first design competitions that I won in school was in India, and it was a poster that I designed for the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. I still remember the slogan. It said, "Black or white, blood is red." I was part of the South Africa Club, and we were very active supporters of Nelson Mandela and the ANC. I distinctly remember singing Nkosi Sikelel' iAfrika. I didn't understand a word of it, but I sung it with a lot of passion. This instilled at a very early age a sense of our world and thinking globally and internationally at a very young age. India that I grew up in was a third world country in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. It was a post-colonial world, and you're probably wondering why the bra packaging. This is just to demonstrate the level of consumerism. This was the only bra brand that was available in the country. So if you weren't a duchess, empress, princess, or Dolce Vita, you probably didn't have anything else to wear. It's not the India that we see now, which is in the news everywhere, we can't escape it. It's an India that's ready to share its contemporary culture with the rest of the world. It's an India which has a new, confident sensibility and identity. This is Nokia's recent campaign for its 1100 phone in India. And it really shows the shift of India and its relationship with the world, where Nokia have actually designed a phone which is called the Nokia 1100, made for India.
Well, my background is not as colourful as Nipper's. I had a very comfortable, a very privileged, idyllic English upbringing. I wasn't the academic type. I had no desire to do A-levels, but I love making. And at 16, I began with fine cabinet making. And it was through my hands that I began to understand the world around me. My design education was focused very much on problem solving, technology, applying good form to ideas. But it wasn't until I met Nipper at the Royal College of Art that, and this is our studio, and until we set up Doshi Levien, that I saw a fabulous opportunity opening up before me. And this was an opportunity to apply my European design experience with somebody coming from a completely different culture and background. Keep going.
Maybe you say something about the new collection.
Well, I was going to talk about how today is a very exciting day for us because we're here at Moroso working on the prototype for our new collection to be launched very soon. And it's based on an archetype of a sofa with very linear, geometric, architectural forms. But we're really working on proportion and detail and stitching and the details that really make this thing sing and make it something very different. So let's see how we get on.
My first degree was the National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad, which was founded on the recommendations of Charles and Ray Eames in 1963. Unfortunately, the manifesto was absolutely beautiful about what design could do for the Indian people, but our school instead chose to follow the Bauhaus and Ulm School of Design. It was very confusing for me because, what we were learning in school actually did not reflect the world outside, which was very celebratory, chaotic, and rooted in a plurality. So while we were learning how to make brown coffee makers, lookalikes, people outside were actually making chai on an open flame in a stainless steel pot. It was really you know, a country where you would see a Mercedes-Benz with a cow and a cycle rickshaw on the road. You have shanty towns and slums right next to very modern glass buildings. So when I came to Europe and I went to London, I really didn't know what I could contribute to a country and society that had everything. Everything seemed designed and it seemed perfect. And at this point, I really started exploring what can I contribute from my culture to the world. Is there a way that I can introduce a sensual and celebratory approach as opposed to the reductionist kind of Western idea of design being about problem solving? And this is where at the Royal College I really started to explore how, in terms of culture of well-being, the visual culture, cinema and storytelling, India could have a lot to offer to the world.
Our relationship and friendship is based very much on working together from the outset at the Royal College of Art. She was very Indian and forthright, I have to say, and an exacting critic of my work. And she was the opposite to my tactful English politeness. And she actually said to me once that I can't be your friend if I don't respect your work. Isn't that mean? Well, to be honest, I wasn't really applying myself at the time, so I probably deserved that. We've chosen 5 projects that best demonstrate the plurality underlying our work. It all began, I think, on a research trip to India in 2000. I was keen to find out what effort the multinational companies were making in India to adapt to local culture. There were a handful of big names such as Philips, Moulinex, and there was Tefal, who were the largest producers of non-stick cookware in the world. And they were selling European cookware in a country that has a very strong food culture of its own. So on our return to London, we proposed to them look at the social changes occurring in India to design a contemporary range of cookware suited to the contemporary Indian way of life.
Well, they came back to us and quite reversed the brief. Because India was too niche and, you know, it was 2000, you know, still wasn't very important. And they suggested that we design cookware inspired from cuisines around the world for the American and European market. So this is a kadhai, for example, which was traditionally made out of mild steel and used to gather a lot of rust. So we made it using cast aluminium with Bakelite handles and a steam release on the top. And you'll be surprised, actually, Jonathan's father uses it to make scrambled eggs. This is a tagine also where we took the authentic tagine is actually made out of terracotta, which bursts on a gas hob. So we did keep the ceramic aspect of it in the lid, for example, and had a glass-filled nylon tip, and the base is a fluor-turned aluminium. Just to go through, this is the wok for Chinese food, the fajita pan for Mexican cooking, and that's the range combined together.
And we made the point to Tefal at the time that technology is widely available throughout the world. What is left to distinguish the Tefal brand from any other brand? And we think the answer lies in forming an emotional connection with the customer by emphasizing the cultural aspect of design, not just the technology.
Tefal, if you've seen their pots, normally print a very technological pattern on the base, which doesn't really mean anything. And we really encourage them to actually print the patterns that related to the culture of the cuisine the pots originated in. We also really persuaded them to not necessarily use black non-stick, which kind of looks very cheap and throwaway. So we invested a lot of time in actually developing colors of non-stick which were more food and culture orientated, like a deep brown and aubergine. There are many ways in which a project may come about. And for example, in the case of Tefal, you know, we made a social and cultural observation, and that led to an industrial design project. But there are also projects which literally come out of the blue, and sometimes they're even from companies that we've never heard about. And this was the case with the Wellcome Trust. Wellcome Trust is the world's largest medical research charity. They give away £1 million a day. And it was founded by Henry Wellcome, who was an anthropologist, a biomedical person, and he actually has a collection of 1 million objects that he collected in his lifetime, which are to do with health and well-being around the world. So his collection would be as much about African healing masks as it would be about medical instruments. So basically we had two 12-meter windows.
Do you want to go back to that one?
Yes. So one of them we called a set window, and the other one was the word window. So because the Wellcome Trust is about health and well-being, we said, okay, well, the first question we are going to ask, as if the building's talking to you, is how are you? It's a question we ask each other every day, but we never really give a true answer. And so when you're driving past, that's all you see. But if on closer look, if you look at the window, it says, tell me how are your genes? Tell me, are you eating well? How are you today?